Daniel Block, senior editor, Foreign Affairs magazine, New York, joins me on the broadcast. And Daniel, from whatever you've heard from President Zelensky and President Trump, the conversations different from the one that they had in February, but overall, what's the big expectation from this meeting for you?
I think it's hard to say right now because, as you rightly noted earlier, there's what we see happening publicly, and then there's what's happening behind the scenes. That said, I think the fact that this didn't end with a blow up between Trump and Zelensky will be a positive side for the Ukrainians. And I think that what they're really hoping is that, in combination with the other leaders in Europe, they can persuade Trump to continue leaving open channels for them to purchase military equipment to send to Ukraine. I think they still regard it as extremely unlikely that there's going to be a negotiated settlement to the war in Ukraine right now. The sense I have from what Ukrainians have said, from the way the Europeans feel, and from basically the offers that Putin has put forward is that while obviously everybody is tired of the fighting of the war, there's no deal to be had that will leave the Ukrainians happy. And understandably so. I mean, Putin is demanding that Ukraine hand over territory that it still currently controls. So I think right now what Ukraine and its allies are looking to do are to keep the pathway for American support open. That's the goal. That's the hope. And whether or not they'll succeed, well, we'll find out.
Sushant Sareen, one part is getting military hardware. The other part is having trained manpower to be able to operate it. Because a system like the Patriot system, to be able to use it effectively, you'd need to spend not weeks but months and months to be able to master that technology. Does Ukraine have that kind of manpower and that kind of trained manpower to operate all the military hardware that may be coming in?
Gaurav, the problem is not just about the trained manpower. The problem is also going to be, will the Ukrainians be able to get enough people in their army?
Yes.
There are so many reports about people not wanting to join the war, they're trying to duck the conscription that is taking place. And the army is being denuded of soldiers, partly because of casualties, partly because many people don't want to join the fight, right? And you literally are forcing people to join the army. Now, there could be some exaggeration in those reports, but nevertheless, the fact of the matter remains that there is a manpower crisis, not just in terms of training, but in sheer numbers. So there is that crisis as well. Now, you can carry on this war, and like I said, it's very easy for the British to say that, guys, carry on fighting. That has been British policy for 500 years. Make others fight and sit on the sidelines and make a profit of the war. So the Brits would want to do it. Some of the other continental European countries have some genuine concerns about Russia. And maybe some kind of a deal, some kind of security guarantees can be worked out. But Gaurav, also remember one thing, there is going to be a problem for the US as well. There is a problem in terms of, can the European allies trust the US to come to their back and have their back in case of a major conflict? And one of the reasons why the Europeans are coming is also to get a measure of the United States. On trade, they've already given in. They've surrendered completely, abjectly to the US. But on security, if they have to surrender the security also to the US and go along with the whims and fancies of the American president, then where does that leave the larger transatlantic relationship? And for the Americans, the problem is going to be that if they are not even ready to deliver the weapons which the Europeans want to buy and give to Ukraine, assuming that can be done, then that entire transatlantic relationship is thrown in jeopardy. So there, not as though the Americans can simply ride roughshod and not bother about the transatlantic relationship, unless, of course, the Americans have given up on it and they're just playing this game, so that somebody can get a Nobel Peace Prize. And I can't understand this obsession with the Nobel Peace Prize. Some of the most useless people have got that prize. I don't know why everything is revolved around this one prize.
But he sincerely wants it. But Geeta, some of the European leaders you've been speaking to in the past several weeks have indicated that they're also looking at a European defense system in whatever way that's possible, given the kind of attitude President Trump has adopted in the past 6 to 8 months?
Well, absolutely. The Germans, we're speaking to a few others as well, and they are on record talking about how it is now important that they cannot have the United States of America as the net security provider for Europe, and that it was a fair ask, and they're now going to do it. They're looking at depending on each other and having a more secure system of self-defense when it comes to Russia. All that is good because it should have come to this. It should have been about Europe and European security, that they'd look after themselves in a way that they do not push countries at the behest of the United States of America to fall for the NATO narrative, which is what we're looking at, unfortunately, President Zelensky fall to. And he did speak of how Ukraine is going to join NATO before the war. He continued speaking of it through the first year of the war, only then to come out and say, well, it's quite clear now that Ukraine is never going to be a part of the NATO. So it's quite unfortunate what's happened. And now war fatigue has set in, not just in Ukraine or Russia, but in Europe as well, Gaurav. So yes, they are looking at how they now need to strengthen themselves to ensure that there is no threat beyond Ukraine in the European Union and the NATO alliance members who are critical to providing security in that part of the world.
Sasha, is there a sense of disappointment in Ukraine? Because Ukraine has fought, and they fought really hard. Geeta and I were on ground zero in Kiev, in Kharkiv, in Mariupol, in Irpin, in Bucha, and we saw how well the Ukrainians fought all along. But more than 3.5 years down the line, is there a sense of fatigue, not just internally, but the fact that supplies are dwindling, help is dwindling, resources are dwindling, and it's a lost cause?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I can tell you that the level of the fatigue that is happening on the fourth year of Russian invasion is terrible right now. And I would say that for now, peaceful negotiation brings only despair on the Ukrainian territory, because as I said before, after that we have horrendous attacks, rocket attacks on civilian cities. If you're talking about front line, so yeah, guys are very exhausted. Soldiers are very exhausted, but they lost so much. So in the order of their mental state, they have nothing to lose. So they are ready to go till the end. Of course, we are now in the very huge shortage of men, of manpower, of weapon, and all kind of means that you need during the war. From one hand, and from other hand, we have exhaustion of the civilian population because they are terrorized almost every night. Reported from all the big cities of the huge amount of victims among children, among women, and etc., etc., etc. So yeah, I can witness that people are desperate in their exhaustion, but still want justice and still want to fight back.
Seema Sirohi, when you look at the kind of territory that's in conversation, Crimea, warm water port, there is no way that President Putin is likely to let go of this part. He wants not just Ukraine, but even Europe and America to recognize Crimea as part of Russia. Donetsk and Luhansk, that Donbass region, he's in control. Kherson, Zaporozhye, do you think he's going to let go of any of it from the maximalist position? Because there are some experts who say, why would he let go of a nuclear power plant in Zaporozhye that he now has under his control?
Yes, see, right now it's very unclear what the understanding, quote unquote, was reached between President Trump and President Putin in Alaska. The details, Trump was uncharacteristically quiet and not loquacious. He's used to talking and not knowing when to stop.
Yes.
But in Alaska, he was keeping it close to his chest. Perhaps there are details that he has been told and that he's going to present to the Europeans and to President Zelensky to figure out what is the best, kind of give and take in terms of territory. From what I understand, in the southern part, Putin is not willing to cede anything. What
Yes.
he controls, he wants to keep controlling. So, right now, it seems to me that President Trump, he is at a point where he can feel that there will be an agreement, and this would be actually, if it works out, would be a claim for a Nobel Peace Prize. Even Hillary Clinton said that.
Except that
Um,
if it comes without ceding territory, and in this case, that there is no way that that will happen. And Daniel Block, when there is conversation about Schedule 5 kind of security. Clearly, Ukraine can never be a part of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. That message has gone out loud and clear. So what kind of, Rule 5 security can Europe and US think of providing Ukraine?
There have been various discussions about what a kind of peacekeeping force or contingent could look like, to what extent it would involve US troops, whether the United States might only provide air power in order to back up whatever European forces are stationed on the ground in order to prevent a Russian reinvasion. But I mean, this really is in some ways absolutely central to any negotiations or talks, because the Ukrainians do not trust Russia to uphold any agreement they make, and correctly so. I mean, Russia agreed to various ceasefires and pauses in fighting and peace deals before this invasion of Ukraine, and then only went ahead and invaded Ukraine anyway. So it's a country, Russia, that does not have a history of standing by its words when it
Okay.
comes to Ukraine.
But in
And so
Article
there's going
5
to need to be
security,
some sort of
is this an indication, Ambassador Sajanhar, that European troops will be deployed in Ukraine? But if that's exactly what Russia does not want, will they permit foreign troops to be deployed in Ukrainian territory?
This is the maximalist demand of Putin, and he has also stated what should be the number of Ukrainian troops, no foreign troops on Ukrainian territory or periphery. So, I guess as we have been speaking, as the other panelists have also been saying, this is up for negotiation, and basically that is where change could take place. But, as far as territory is concerned, it appears very unlikely that, Putin might be willing to let go of any territory that's under his control. One point I would like to make, everyone seems to suggest that, everyone wants an end to the war. And, Sasha explained it so very poignantly as to what has happened in Ukraine and what is happening there. And Ukraine definitely is the first contender that wants the war to stop. Europeans also want the war to stop because it's a matter of their own security. One country that does not appear to be very keen to stop the war is Russia, because there have been, over the last so many months, there have been so many offers, so many proposals that have been made for limited ceasefire, 15 days, 1 month, etc., and none of that seems to be acceptable to Russia. And even
Okay.
now, so maybe they think that they are on a winning spree. They are, they might be making slow progress, but they are getting territory, wherever they are. And so the more that they are able to occupy, the more they'll be able to keep. So I
Except it
think
comes at a huge cost. The losses of lives that have taken place, even on the Russian side, the loss to their industry, so many hundred billions of dollars of theirs blocked in European banks and overseas. Sushant Sareen, does this make diplomatic or military or strategic sense for Russia to continue to push on and maximize the advantage, or would Russia want that if there is no if there's a guarantee that NATO is not coming into Ukraine, or they ensure that, as they claim, denazification of Ukraine, then they can look at other options?
No, I think they can look at other options. What if the other option is that Ukraine will not join NATO, but NATO troops by another name will be deployed in Ukraine? Then why would the Russians accept that? It doesn't stand to logic, does it? That the French, the Germans, the rest of them will be putting their troops to guarantee Ukrainian security. I don't see how that's ever going to be acceptable to the Russians, right? That's not going to happen, or American troops coming in. And I don't see how Trump can explain American troops now being deployed in Ukraine to his own constituency. So I think there are a lot of problems in that particular arrangement which people are talking about.
Okay.
Secondly, what might happen is some kind of a iron cast guarantee, something which happened during, for example, during the Cold War, with Austria, for example. Both sides decided that Austria is not going to be a member of NATO, it won't be a member of the Warsaw Pact, and it had a certain neutrality and nobody really interfered in it. Actually, everybody interfered in it, but
Yes.
there was no war over Austria. Something to that extent might be worked out. I don't know what
But-
the diplomats.
Okay, the
The
last
third-
30 seconds I have on this part of the show, Geeta, the Russians are also watching this very closely as they continue, according to the Ukrainians, their attacks on some of the vital assets and vital points, including, as the Ukrainians say, some civilian areas. So that ceasefire is still quite a big dream and quite far away.
Well, could be that, but Kirill Dmitriev, who is the main negotiator from the Russian side, has just put out saying that lasting peace versus temporary ceasefire. Gaurav, that's telling, because that's exactly what the conversation is going to be, whether they want permanent peace or just a temporary ceasefire. And is ceasefire important or more important than peace?
I will let that be the last word on this part of the show. To all my guests, many thanks for joining me. As this conversation continues at the White House, our reporters on ground are keeping a hawk eye on all developments.